Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting us here, for giving this opportunity. Having spent years now traveling to and fro Syria, reporting from here, it is an honor to have finally met you. But Mr. President, since time is short, first question, your latest victories in Ghouta, in Yarmouk, they have drastically changed the situation on the ground in Syria. How much nearer the end of this war are we now, in your estimation?
First of all, you're most welcome in Syria. With every move forward in the battlefield, with every victory, with every liberated area, we are moving closer to the end of the conflict. And I always said, without external interference, it won't take more than a year to settle the situation in Syria. But at the same time, with every move forward for the Syrian army and for the political process and for the whole situation forward in the positive meaning towards the more stability, our enemies and our opponents, mainly the West, led by the United States and their puppets in Europe and in our region, with their mercenaries in Syria, they try to make it further, either by supporting more terrorism, bringing more terrorists coming to Syria, or by hindering the political process. So our challenge is how can we make this gap, to close this gap between their plans and our plans. And I think we are succeeding in that regard. But at the same time, it's difficult for anyone to tell you when. But it is getting closer, that's self-evident.
Well, your latest military victories, they have been, objectively speaking, spectacular. The speed at which rebel defenses that have withstood for years have collapsed. Are you planning on retaking all of Syria by force? We're talking about Idlib, the border with Israel, SDF-controlled territories.
The war is the worst choice. I think every Syrian agreed upon this fact. But sometimes you only have this choice, especially when you talk about factions like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like Al-Nusra, and the like-minded factions. Actually, most of them have the same ideology, Jaish Islam, Dahrar Sham, and so on. They're not ready for any dialogue. They don't have any political plan. They only have this dark ideological plan, is to be like any Al-Qaeda controlled area anywhere in this world. So the only option to deal with those factions is force. At the same time, in other areas, we succeeded by implementing reconciliations, especially when the community in those different areas made pressure on those militants to leave those areas. So I think the best choice is to make reconciliation. This is our plan. But when it doesn't work, the only method to resort to is the force.
Well, with regards to reconciliation, how wise is it to send all of these veteran jihadists with their small arms to Idlib? By now, tens of thousands have gone to Idlib. They have consolidated. They have built defenses. Eventually, as you say, you'll have to fight them. On the other hand, are you perhaps planning on building an area that is outside of government control?
Actually, we always say we're going to liberate every area. So it's impossible for us to intentionally leave any area on the Syrian soil outside our control as government. This is natural. And as you know, Idlib was captured by the terrorists in 2015 with this Turkish support. It was mainly captured by Al-Nusra and some other supportive factions. We started the reconciliations before that time, but every reconciliation happened after that time, after 2015. It was, I think, May 2015. Every faction wanted to leave the city or the village. They choose to go to Idlib. This is very good indication that they have the same ideology, because they choose to go to Al-Nusra area, they didn't choose to go to any other area. So we didn't send people to Idlib. They wanted to go to Idlib because they have the same incubator, they have the same atmosphere, way of thinking, and so on. This one part. The other part, which is military aspect of your question, the plan of the terrorists and their masters was to distract the Syrian army by scattering the different units all over the Syrian soil, which is not good for any army. Our plan was to put them in one area, 2 areas, 3 areas. Let's say if you have 2 or 3 or 4 frontiers, better than having tens and maybe more than 100 frontiers at the same time. So militarily, it is better. They chose it, but it's better for us from the military point of view.
On the other hand, talking about similar mindsets, Idlib is predominantly, the rebels there overwhelmingly are Sunni. You know, as a Sunni myself, I have a long distant relative who came to Syria to fight against you, to resist you, because he was told that you were targeting, you were killing Sunnis, and that is what many people in Idlib believe. Why is it that so many people in all these different countries, in America, in Russia, these Sunnis, these Muslims, they believe that you are oppressing them?
Because the first narrative, when it started internationally, mainly in the West, of course, and within Syria, and in some mainstream media in our region and in the West, their plan was to create this rift within the society that will make things easier for them when you have such a civil war, kind of civil war between sects or ethnicities, and it failed. Now they keep using the same narrative, at least to encourage some fanatics in different places in the world to come and defend their brothers in this area, because that's how they imagine. They imagine that there's conflict between sects. So because of their narrow-minded way of thinking, maybe or their ignorance, they came here just to support their brothers. Now, if I'm going to tell you this is right or wrong, your audience doesn't know me. They don't have any idea maybe about my credibility. But I'll tell you, you know Syria very well. It's better to go and see the reality on the ground. Now, if there's such a narrative, let's say, in reality, sects killing another sect, Syria should be divided now according to sectarian line. You should come to this area under our control and see one color or a few colors of the Syrian society. You should go to the other area where you have the terrorists. You should have different colors. And the reality is not like this. Now, in Damascus, in Aleppo, in Homs, in every area under the Syrian government control, you will see every spectrum of the Syrian society, with no exceptions. So that this reality will debunk this narrative. I mean, how could they live with each other while the government is killing them according to sectarian basis? It doesn't work.
Fair enough, but with regards to negotiations and reconciliation, there have been efforts to start talks to achieve a result in Geneva, in Astana. There has been limited success, but it hasn't been all that great. Now, let's be honest, you're winning. You're winning on the ground, your forces are advancing, the rebels are in retreat. Why would you negotiate with them now that they're losing?
Since the very beginning, we said whenever we can save Syrian blood, we have to go forward and deal with this with any initiative, any kind of initiative, even if they have bad will. Some initiatives have bad will, but in spite of that, we dealt with. And the reality now, if you go around Syria, the reality, the results that's been embodied by the reconciliations is a proof of what I'm saying. Without this policy, without this intention of saving blood, negotiating, talking to people, we couldn't have reached these reconciliations. This is one thing. The other thing, not everyone for the government have the same basis. Some of them have ideological background, some of them for financial background. Some of them, they made mistake at the very beginning. They were forced to go in that direction and they couldn't withdraw. So you have to open the doors and you have to distinguish between different kind of people. And the most important than this, the majority of the people who were against the government apparently in the different liberated area, actually in their hearts, they are with the government. Because they could tell the difference between having government and having chaos.
Well, with regards to talks and retaking areas by force, let's take, for example, SDF-controlled territories in Deir ez-Zor. There have been clashes there between troops who were loyal to you and the SDF itself, United States partners. And the United States brought to bear force to stop troops loyal to you from taking territories. This has happened at Al-Tanf as well. How are you going to deal with the United States presence, military presence in Syria?
After the liberation of Aleppo and later Deir ez-Zor, and before that Homs and now Damascus, actually the United States is losing its cards. The main card was al-Nusra, that was called moderate. But when the scandal started leaking that they are not moderate, they are Al-Qaeda, that was supposed to be fought by United States, they look for another card. This card is the SDF now, because when, as it seems, as you just mentioned, we are moving forward in the different areas to defeat the terrorists, the only problem left in Syria is the SDF. We're going to deal with it by two options. The first one, we started now opening doors for negotiations, because the majority of them are Syrians. And supposedly they like their country. They don't like to be puppets to any foreigners. That's what we suppose. So we have the same basis. We all don't trust the Americans for decades, not because of the war, but they only say thing and they do the opposite. They tell daily lies. So we have one option is to live with each other as Syrian, like forever. This is the first option. If not, we're going to resort to liberating by force, to liberating those areas by force. We don't have any other options. With American or without Americans, we don't have any other option. So this is our land, it's our right, and it's our duty to liberate it. And the American should leave somehow. They're going to leave. They came to Iraq with no legal basis, and look what happened to them. They have to learn the lesson. Iraq is no exception, and Syria is no exception. People will not accept foreigners in this region anymore.